Okay, good to see everyone. Uh, we're getting near summer vacation. Several people are off doing various things, retreats and so forth. So we have a little smaller number, but uh, let's begin with prayers to try to motivate ourselves, set a motivation for the coming class. And Shankar, if you'd like to increase the size of that, yeah, there you go. Sangye churang soki chognam la changchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa sho. So I should be saying, so when the Dalai Lama recites that verse, move it up a little bit, Shankar. Instead of saying Dagi Chunyan, he'll say Dagi Chushe, meaning due to the collections I create through explaining the Dharma or presenting the Dharma. So if you ever listen to the teachings when he is saying, everyone else will say Dagi Chunyan Gipe Sognam Ki, the listeners, but as he is the presenter, he'll say Dagi Chushe. If I say that, because there's no other voices here, that's all you'll hear. So I say Dagi Chunyan Gipe Sognam Ki. And then offering the mandala. By offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma. Please send down that vast and profound Dharma from the clouds in your Dharmakaya wisdom, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. So I can think the same thing. Hi, Paul. Hi, Karen and David. Snehi's also here. Good to see you all. Uh, I can think the same thing when I'm saying that because, you know, as I've mentioned before, Lama Zopa many times would say during teachings that he felt himself was just sort of like a vehicle through which his guru, in the sense Lama Yeshe, was teaching. And the same thing, and anything that I say that's correct is due to my having heard from my gurus and being blessed during the exposition by by my gurus. So that's why I would think also please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma through my consciousness out my mouth. Okay, so let's begin with a little meditation. Sit comfortably if you can. Relax your body and mind. Place your attention on the mind, on the breathing in front. And once you've recognized it, place your mindfulness on that breathing. then if you've been successful to generate a neutral state of mind with getting rid of the various thoughts that had preceded, turn your attention to the more subtle object of your mental consciousness. Not what you are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, or touching. Consciousness is defined as that which is clear and knowing. The clarity has many different interpretations at different points. Consciousness being very, very subtle is not something that can be directly known from the beginning, but has to be inferred through seeing its contents at first and understanding the consciousness. The space-like consciousness is that envelope within which those contents come and go. One can recognize through one's own experience that the mind is not hindering those various mental events. It doesn't hinder their propagation, their continuation, doesn't hinder their dissolving back into consciousness, nor for new material to arise in the consciousness. Has no sort of mental viscosity, so to speak. This non-affirming segment of the nature of the clarity is what's called the conventional Buddha nature, or developmental Buddha nature. And to recall again and again like this, that we have this, that nothing else matters. We can develop good qualities. We can get rid of our faults. And the fact that we can recognize this and feel joy about this is due to our having at this moment an auspicious moment, as the Buddha referred to it, of a life of leisure and endowment. Which itself is an object of rejoicing also. We can use this life to go beyond just the appearances of this lifetime of happiness and suffering and success and failure and gain and loss and so forth. We can instead use it, this opportunity, as we have probably attempted numberless times in the past, to ascend toward liberation or enlightenment, but we've never followed through on that during those lives when we had perfect human rebirths before. Now, this may be the moment when we can actually make progress, sort of on a continuum to continue toward those goals. But of those two goals, liberation or enlightenment, the Buddha suggested for his intelligent followers that they not be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings alone, but strive for the state of perfect enlightenment, perfect complete enlightenment. And to do so, the Buddha introduced the idea of urging his disciples to develop bodhicitta, because that's the differentiating factor between the Hinayana goal of liberation and the Mahayana goal of enlightenment. To be working for this goal, not for one's own pratimoksha, individual liberation, but for the sake of achieving enlightenment in order to benefit sentient beings. Which requires developing a heartwarming attitude toward all sentient beings, seeing them all as though they had been our mother, and recognizing their plight is the same as ours, being immersed in cyclic existence, never finding real happiness within cyclic existence, developing compassion for them, and with an attitude of remembering their kindness, wanting to repay their kindness, thinking I must achieve a state in which I can lead them out of suffering into stable happiness. Stable happiness here means happiness which is everlasting, the bliss of liberation or enlightenment. To do that, we have ourselves to achieve enlightenment. And that requires the accumulation of the two collections of merit and wisdom, especially the collection of wisdom we're talking about here, but always integrating it with the collection of merit that are the sustaining factors to achieve the two Buddha bodies, the Dharmakaya requiring the collection of wisdom, the Rupakaya requiring the collection of merit. So think, okay, I'm going to participate in the class today in order to better understand how to accumulate the collection of wisdom and merit, the collections, through the teachings of the Buddha and his sutras, through the commentary by Nagarjuna in his fundamental wisdom, Chandrakirti's commentary on that in his Madhyamaka Avatara, and Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on that in his Gompa Rabsel, Illumination of the Intention. I'm going to participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. That's my goal. Thank you. So bring your attention back to the present. So, how is everyone? Good. Before we begin, anyone have any questions? How are we doing? Karen, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you. I wanted to share before we begin, sort of as a motivation, also something that happened to me this week after my last. I go to the fitness center in town a couple of times a week, once with a trainer, and had a good session last Thursday. And afterwards, what was it? I went shopping. Oh no, I think I had maybe. Oh yeah, I had I saw the chiropractor. I had a good session. Went shopping, and when I was in the checkout line, there was one woman behind me with either her daughter or her granddaughter. I think it was probably her granddaughter, with one of the big shopping baskets. I don't know if your supermarkets have the same thing. Some nowadays there's some mini baskets, if you're just getting a few things. I usually just get that. And then there's the big family size basket, which has two layers, the top with a basket, and then there's a layer in the bottom where you can put other things. And this lady's cart was full to the brim over, on top, big things were about to fall out, and the bottom layer was completely full. And I looked back and smiled at her and I said, wow, you're shopping for a lot of people, something like that. And she looked at me with dagger eyes, sort of Vajrapani eyes, and said, mind your own business. And I recognized immediately the good feeling I had. Remember, I said I had a good workout, I had a good chiropractic session, um, got some food, and my mind was sort of happy. And it suddenly, we call it, how would you translate, Paul? Sempamba. Do you know that expression?
I'm not sure I do.
Sort of like the mind is sort of defeated, sort of like, like, oh. And I recognized that this was the wheel of sharp weapons coming back from harsh words, that I have uttered in this and previous lives that caused others' minds to become, like sort of like from their neutral, peaceful state into some sort of like, oh, why did he say that? And once she said, mind your own business, she walked away, and I looked at her daughter or granddaughter, who looked kind of shocked. Looked like she was about 6, 7 years old. And I thought, I said, tell your mom, or that I was assuming that was her mom, but it was probably her grandmother, that I didn't mean any offense. Um, but I felt, as a result of that, compassion for this woman, because she had just created the karmic cause for the wheel of sharp weapons to come back to her in the future, for her peace of mind to be disturbed by harsh words from others. And so that's one way that I recognize that although my mind is not well trained in the mind training, I try. And this was one evidence to me that at least I had, some semblance of not immediately retaliating and saying, same to you, something, mind your own business too. That there was a mind of compassion rising and a recognition, born from the recognition of karma, that this was the result of my own past misdeeds, sort of like the echo coming back, right? Okay, I just wanted to share that with you. Hope that you're able to successfully, do better than even that when you are accosted by some kinds of unfavorable words and so forth in the future. Okay, so I asked before if there were any questions, but I'm not sure if I gave you time. Anyone have any questions about what we're been talking about here? No? Okay. So we are at a point where we're going to begin this on Thupten Jinpa's text, page 303, if I haven't typed this down wrong, and in the FPMT translation by Venerable Joan Nysel, page 168. And for Diana and others who are on digital copies that don't have page numbers, you can check the childish conceive the world in dualistic terms. Okay, so that's where we finished last time. We read that and said that we would continue from there. So just as a reminder, the verse of the Karika of Chandrakirti. So Lama Tsongkhapa's text is a commentary to Chandrakirti's Karikas and a commentary to his Chandrakirti's Bhasham. I don't know if you've noticed that before we've mentioned, but you may have forgotten. Lama Tsongkhapa sometimes actually comments on the Karika and then comments on the Bhasham. And if you've already memorized one or both of those, like the Tibetan monks and nuns might do in the monasteries, you would know what he's talking about. So this is talking about the previous verse, 646 in Thupten Jinpa's text, that said, just as in the ocean whipped by a windstorm, waves rise high one after another, so from the seed of all, the foundation consciousness, the alaya vijnana, mere consciousness arises through its own potential. So that's where we had finished that the commentary to that a little bit. So this is the end of the near the end of the commentary to that. So it says, the childish conceive the world in dualistic terms. So the childish should be understood to mean the naive. That means those who, this is talking about from Chittamatra view, right? This is sort of the Chittamatra presentation, that the naive who don't realize that there's no external world that's a different entity from the mind. That's why they're called the childish. Also in Madhyamaka, the Buddhist sutras, again and again, the Buddha referred to those who were not yet spiritually attuned as the childish or the naive. The childish conceive the world in dualistic terms, dualistic terms of subject and object. So the Chittamatra are saying that's naive or childish to think that there is a dualism between the objects and the subjects, right? They are actually, in reality, according to Chittamatra, they are actually of the same entity. Dividing it into inner and outer, so the inner subject and the outer objects. Yet no object exists, not even the slightest, that is substantially separate from consciousness. Okay, makes sense? Not nothing new there. So the above statement, and we mentioned this last time, the above statement indicates that in much the same manner as those who assert Ishvara and so on to be the creator of the world of beings. What is it in modern Hinduism? Snehi, you may be more, or maybe Venerable also. I thought, what is Shiva? Shiva's the destroyer, right? And the creator is Ishvara,
Brahma.
Brahma. So here it's talking about maybe some other aspect of the Vedic teachings where Ishvara is considered to be the creator of the world and beings. Okay. The above statement indicates that much in the same manner as those who assert Ishvara and so on to be the creator of the world of beings, the proponents of foundation consciousness, the Chamatrans, following a Sangha, speak of Alaya Vijnana as being the bearer of all seeds, since it is the basis of all the entities that are perceived as objects of consciousness. So you can also think of this as, in a sense, presenting the Christian or the Abrahamic religion's view that the Godhead, whether it be called God or Yahweh or what in Islam what's it called?
Allah.
Allah. Sort of they believe that is the creator of all, right? So, for example, one reads, and so this is from an unknown at this time, still after many decades of searching from some Hindu Vedic text. Jimpa translates it, and we mentioned this last time. A spider is the cause of a spider web. Waterstone, that of water, and just as a tree trunk is the cause of its branches, it, meaning Ishvara, is the cause of all beings. So Jimpa's note also mentions that that's quoted in Chandrakirti, but it doesn't give a source to that. I mentioned also last time that as Venerable Jones' translation says, like a cow is the cause of mooing. The first line, Bani Bada Namgigyu. So it's not clear. I was not clear where Jimpa got a spider is the cause of a spider web from that. Paul, did you happen to have any thoughts of that since last week? We mentioned it in passing.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend last week. I was traveling, so I missed that.
Right.
So
Okay. I thought maybe you had heard the.
I didn't get to get caught up. I'm sorry.
Okay. No problem. No problem. Okay. So after stating that verse from a Hindu text, or let's say a Vedic text, maybe a Vedic Tantra, the commentary continues in Jimpa's translation. The difference is that while Ishvara is eternal, Jimpa's writing God here, while Ishvara is eternal, foundation consciousness is impermanent. It is through teaching foundation consciousness, therefore, that the Buddha tames many who have been habituated to heterodox views over many lifetimes. So this is sort of indicating one of the reasons, the rationale for the Buddha teaching foundation consciousness. Remember, we said one of the reasons was to have a repository for the seeds that would continue from life to life and through states when there was no other, when the mental consciousness was not active and so forth. But here also it said, it is through teaching foundation consciousness that the Buddha tames many who have been habituated to heterodox views over many lifetimes to the belief in a permanent creator. And so that would also, you might say, if the Buddha was anticipating Christianity and the Abrahamic religions, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, that they talk about the Godhead as being permanent, that this is a way to tame their minds. So then a question arises. When presenting the view of the Chittamatra, the commentary often speaks of there being, quote, no external reality. So this is, who's asking this question? Stephen, do you have any idea?
I'm not certain, Venerable George.
So this is kind of like, the Chittamatra looking at Chandrakirti's explanation of their system. When presenting the view of the Chittamatra, the commentary, Chandrakirti's commentary, often speaks of there being no external reality. It also says things like, quote, objects separate from consciousness do not exist in the slightest. Is that right? That's how Chandrakirti is presenting the Chittamatra view here, right? Objects separate from consciousness do not exist in the slightest. That means objects are not separate from consciousness. They arise from the same seed that gives rise to the consciousness that knows them. It also says things like objects separate from consciousness do not exist in the slightest, which qualifies the non-existence of objects such as form in terms of not existing, quote, separate from consciousness. So this is an important point. Lama Tsongkhapa is not presenting the Chittamatra view is saying that there are no external objects. He's saying that there's no external objects that are a different entity than the mind. So mentioned that several times over the last years. So that's a subtle point. So some people will say Chittamatra says there are no external objects. They do accept external objects, but not external objects that are different entities from the mind. What they call external objects are of the same entity to the mind. Do you see a difference there? Karen, yeah. So, okay, let's read a little bit further and see if we can grok this. So, which qualifies the non-existence of objects such as form in terms of not existing as, quote, separate from consciousness. So that's a qualifying statement. So in the Prasangika, we often say that there is no eye, there is no ear, no nose, no taste, no touch, like say in the Heart Sutra, right? But that's always qualified, meaning there is no inherently existing eye, no ear, no inherently existing ear, and so forth. That qualifying statement. It doesn't, Prasangika is not saying that there is no I whatsoever, because for Prasangika, there is a conventionally existent I, right? Meaning, in this case, meaning the eye organ, right? Mikhail, do you follow? So that's a qualifying statement that has to be amended to those qualifying statement. No inherently existing I. Inherently existent is a qualifying statement that has to be added here. What do we say? Objects separate from consciousness do not exist in the slightest, which qualifies the non-existence of objects such as form in terms of not existing as, quote, separate from consciousness. So separate from consciousness is the qualifying statement in the Chittamatra. Does that help a little bit, Karen, in understanding what the difference is? So just as Prasangika doesn't say that there is no I whatsoever, there's no, you have to amend to that, add to that, no inherently existing I. Chittamatra says it's not that there's no external objects, but that there are no external objects that are separate from consciousness. Okay. Snehi, what do you think?
I was wondering, Venerable George, when they say like the flower is of the same entity as consciousness, what do they mean by the same entity?
That means that on the alaya vijnana, there was a seed that ripened at this point when the I consciousness arose. That seed ripened into two things: the object of the consciousness and the consciousness itself. So they are of the same, the object and the consciousness are of the same entity. They arise from that same seed. Maybe that's not quite satisfying.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was confused about that. So they're saying the fact that I see the flower and that I know I see the flower is because it's coming from that one seed in my foundation consciousness.
The fact that you know you see this, that's another question.
No. Oh, okay. So I'm confused.
Flower,
I'm not.
the seeing of the flower.
Yeah, seeing of the flower. So
Right.
my eye consciousness, knowing it's seeing a flower and the flower itself that's presenting itself to my eye, both arise from the same seed.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Okay.
They both arise from the same seed. So that's sort of one of the distinguishing characteristics of the alaya vijnana, its purpose. Why the Chittamatra, why the Chittamatra system interprets it this way. Buddha himself talked about it this way. But he had an intention, an ulterior motive, so to speak, a higher intention in teaching it that way in order to lead people to the correct view later that were still, say, for instance, if they had been habituated with a view of a permanent creator, or because they needed a repository for the seeds of karma and so forth. Okay, so continuing. And on the line, quote, is what is conceived as the physical eye organ, unquote, which is going to come up in verse 662, the last line of that. So that's many, many pages in the future in this text. So again, Lama's Chandrakirti in that karika. So we're right now at which verse 46, right? So when you get up to verse 62 of the 6th chapter, there is a line that says, is what is conceived as the physical organ. So this is related also. So when we talk about consciousness, remember we talked about from the lower schools, say the Sautrantika point of view, generally, we say that there are three factors that are necessary, right? We need to have the organ, we need the, what do you call it? The faculty or empowering condition, the organ, the objective condition, the object itself, and a previous moment of consciousness, the immediately preceding moment of consciousness. Those three factors. So for the Chittamatra, what is the organ? What is the faculty? What is the empowering condition? Here it says, what is what is conceived as the physical eye organ. Chandrakirti writes in the commentary at that point. So that this same commentary will come later in the commentary to verse 662. There is no I organ, no I faculty that is separate from consciousness. Right? It's just, from the Chittamatra point of view, all of the outer phenomena are of the nature of consciousness. They're not separate from consciousness. Remember when we just said that qualifying phrase, there's no external world separate from consciousness. So there's no I organ separate from consciousness. So in relation to Chittamatra, should one qualify what is being negated in the context of the rejection of the external reality in the above terms, or should one accept without qualification that the five sense objects, such as visible form and the five sense organs, do not exist at all? So what would you think? It's not going to be that they don't exist at all. It's that they don't exist as separate entities from the consciousness. Okay, so response. Yes, in the commentary, both instances are found. So you could say the same thing about the Heart Sutra. Both, it says that the I does not exist. There is no I, there is no there is no ear, there is no nose, no tongue, and so forth. But then you also find in other places, amended to that, there is no inherently existent phenomena whatsoever, right? So one has to know from that context that the places where it doesn't mention that, you have to add no inherently existent thing there. So in the same sense here, both instances are found, namely with the qualification applied and without it. That is to say that sometimes it says that there is no external reality, but that has to be understood as meaning there is no external reality separate from the mind. Are you grokking that, Richard? Making sense? Not too bad. Paul?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Sean.
So are they saying if like you and I were looking at your mug,
Yeah,
your mind is creating the mug in your mind, and my mind is creating the mug in my mind?
yeah.
But then if one of us vanishes, the mug still remains.
Yeah. So there's a lot of difficult points in the Chittamatra about that the Prasangika could bring up, especially with relationship to other people. But here we're just talking about this thing. Let me just finish this section first. Response. Yes, in the commentary, both instances are found, namely with the qualification and applied and without. In other words, there is no external reality is stated sometimes, and sometimes is stated there is no external reality separate from the mind. Talking about Chittamatra, right? That said, just as repeated instances of qualification in the context of negating arising must be extended to all instances where it is not found, the same must be done here. So sometimes it says, what does the fundamental wisdom say in the first verse? There is no arising from self, from other, from both self and other, and neither at any time in any place. Just says there's none. So you have to know that you have to amend to that there is no inherently existent arising from other, right? Because from the Prasangika point of view, there is conventionally existent production from other. Yeah, Snehi.
Venerable George, I was just thinking to your comment just few minutes ago about, the three things you need in order for like an I consciousness to arise, the empowering condition, so I was just thinking if I then apply that to, and in what you were saying, we think that the object is the cause of the I consciousness. But then if I apply that to Chittamatra, then am I saying that for them, all three don't apply? It's just consciousness and it's simultaneous, like the object and the perception is simultaneous?
Right. Remember, we were discussing this before. Maybe it was a class you missed. That generally there's a causal relationship in the other tenets between the object and the consciousness. Just as you say, the object that gives rise to consciousness the next instant after the object that we're perceiving. So anytime we think we're perceiving something, we're always perceiving that thing that exists the moment before that consciousness arose, right? Because the consciousness, being an effect of the object, arises afterwards. Whereas, according to Chittamatra, following a Sangha here, they are of the same nature. They have a natural relationship. They don't have a causal relationship. Okay, let's continue a little bit further. Yes, in the commentary, both instances are found, namely with the qualification applied and without. That said, just as repeated instances of qualification in the context of negating arising must be extended to all instances where it is not found, the same must be done here as well. Okay, for example, in the summary of the great vehicle, so we haven't encountered this text before, have we? The summary of the great vehicle, Mahayana Samgraha. We've had various texts, we've encountered various texts, sutras that had the word summary in them, or shastras, also commentaries with summary. But this is one that a Sangha wrote, in summary of the Mahayana Samgraha, an authoritative text representing the opponent's standpoint, meaning the Chittamatra standpoint. So in that text, there is a statement, this is according to Jimpa's translation, why is it called the appropriating consciousness? And this is in many of Asanga's texts, they're written in this way, not only Asanga's, but other texts, sort of like posing it as a question first and then answering it. Why is it called the appropriating consciousness? Because it is the cause of all physical sense organs. And it is the basis upon which all physical bodies are appropriated. Therefore, so long as one's lifespan endures, it sustains the 5 physical sense organs without disintegration. So, yeah, is that easy to understand? So Venerable Jones translates, why is it called the appropriating consciousness? Chicher lempe nampa shepe shejawa shena. So, lempe nampa shepa. It doesn't say newar lempa. Usually when we talk about appropriation, we talk about newar lempa, like we say the appropriated aggregates, the aggregates that we take up upon rebirth. But here it's just talking about, he's translating appropriating, they're both translating appropriating as just lempa itself. So in there is a translation of the Mahayana Samgraha you have in your personal library, Paul, by Lamont, I think. Is that right? Yeah, Lamont.
Yeah, I think so. I believe I do.
So in that there is I don't read French, so I depend on a translation of that by a Western nun. What was her name here? Gelongma Karma Migme. Migme Chudran. Is that the Snehi? Is that the Gelongma that was teaching Gopa Robson? No.
No, that was
So
Kelsang Wang.
yeah, Kelsang. So this is from chapter 1, verse 5. If you happen to have that text, maybe on Monday I can present to you that whole page. So in that text, at that point, this is from chapter 1 of the Mahayana Samgraha. In her translation, she says, her translation of Lamot, which is translating Sangha, right? Why is it, and she has in brackets, alaya vijnana, called the appropriating consciousness? Because it appropriates all the material organs, and because it is the support of the grasping of all this, all the existences, or maybe we say all existences. It is the support of grasping all existences. Why is that? The material organs appropriated by this consciousness do not perish as long as life lasts. So one reason is calling appropriating consciousness is that it provides a basis for the continuation during one lifetime of what appears to be the organs, the faculties. It continues, and this was not translated here, but the very following sentence says, furthermore, at the moment of reincarnation, because it grasps their production, this consciousness appropriates the states of existence. That also is why it is called appropriating consciousness. Excuse me. You remember me telling you stories about Yashizoba when he had a cough? They have the lozenges. This is mine. This is not yours. I mean, let this soak in for a second. Yeah, Richard.
Venerable, I'm not exactly sure what's meant by the word appropriate in this context.
So if the government appropriates your land, what does that mean?
It takes it.
Yeah, that's why I said here the term is just lempa, not newar lempa, which is usually how we translate appropriate. So it means that it takes it up. So so when it's talking about it, I'm sucking on the lozenge to see if I can.
Should we just take a few minutes break, Venerable George, so your throat can settle?
Yeah, let's take our break early today. And hopefully I'll be recuperated by then. Okay, let's get more. Okay, so Nadine and Stephen are still fetching their tea.
You want me to pause
No,
it?
no, that's okay. That's okay. So, yeah. So let me read again the Gelongma Karma Mikme Chudran, her translation from the French. She translated all of Lamont's Mahayana Samgraha, his translation into French. She translated it into English. So a Sangha wrote in Sanskrit. I'm not sure that I'd have to see the preface to her book. Do you know, did she translate that from the Sanskrit or from the Tibetan, Paul?
You mean Lamont?
Well,
Or
let's say Lamont first. Yeah, yeah. Sure.
he translated it from Chinese.
Oh, he translated it from Chinese. So there's not a Sanskrit.
I think there's Sanskrit fragments,
Okay, right.
but I don't think there's a complete Sanskrit, if I remember correctly.
So Lamont translated Asanga's text from the, so he,
I
Asanga,
think he probably consulted the Tibetan.
right.
But yeah, I don't think there's a complete Sanskrit for that. No.
So Asanga wrote in Sanskrit. That was translated into Chinese. Lamont translated the Chinese into French, and Gelongma translated it into English, and probably relying more on the Tibetan, because if she was Gelongma, that probably means that she was ordained in the Tibetan tradition. Usually, if you're ordained in one of the Chinese Mahayana traditions that's not Tibetan, you won't necessarily call yourself Gelongma, you'll call yourself Bhikshuni or something like that, right? Anyway, so she added the extra sentence after the sentence that is translated in our text that said, furthermore, at the moment of reincarnation, because and it refers to alaya vijnana, grasps their production, this consciousness appropriates the states of existence. That also is why it is called appropriating consciousness. So usually what that means that's the one of the reasons in the Abhidharma when it talks about the appropriated aggregates, they are appropriated by consciousness at the time of conception, right? When the consciousness enters into the fertilized egg, it appropriates the form aggregate there and the ensuing gross mental aggregates.
That's exactly the problem I'm having trouble understanding, which is appropriated from where exactly?
Okay, so the form is there already, right? The fertilized egg. So it's said that the subtle consciousness of the Bardo being, when it has the karma to take rebirth in that particular fertilized egg. We'll use that example as a fertilized egg. There are other ways it can take rebirth spontaneously and so forth. But let's say from an egg, fertilized egg, that consciousness enters into that egg, fertilized egg, and in so doing, it integrates into that and appropriates the form. The form was separate from consciousness before, right? When the consciousness enters, it then takes over. It's the boss.
Got it. Got it. And so that suggests to me that there have to be forms external to consciousness, because there has to be a place from which something has been appropriated.
Right, from the Prasangika point of view. But here it says, furthermore, at the moment of reincarnation, so this is Chittamatra, this is from Mahayana Sangraha. This is a sentence that's not translated by Chandrakirti or Lama Tsongkhapa here. It's coming right after the paragraph that we just read. Furthermore, at the moment of reincarnation or rebirth, because it grasps their production, and what there means is, let's see, this consciousness appropriates the states of existence. So it appropriates, essentially appropriating the aggregates. This is also why it is called appropriating consciousness. Okay, let's leave that for a second and read the second part. So in Jimpa's text says, and in the FPMT translation, it says, the same text says, or this text says, I was a little bit confused. I was thinking Venerable Joan was saying this text meaning Chandrakirti, but he's talking about the same Mahayana Samgraha, this text by Asanga. So this is another quotation. The common ones, the quote, common ones, unquote, are the seeds of the container world. Remember, we were talking about when we were talking about karma in the break, Sean, we were talking about individual karma and collective karma, right? So you could say common karma. Collective karma is kind of like karma, common karma. The common ones are all the seeds of the container world. So why do we use that kind of terminology in the Abhidharma? We talk about the container and its contents. The container means the environment which contains all the sentient beings. We say that so nuchu. Do you know that phrase in Tibetan, Paul? Nuchu
Yes.
means what?
Well, nö means container,
Yeah.
and chu means something like what is contained, I think, something
Yeah,
like
the
that.
essence. Yeah, it sometimes means essence. Nuchu. So it means that which is contained within the environment, meaning the sentient beings. So here it says the common ones are all the seeds of the container world. That means the environment. The uncommon ones are all the seeds of the individual being's sense bases or faculties. The common ones are seeds from which insentient things emerge, or things without mind emerge. Okay, so that's a little bit complicated. So Venerable Joan translated that as the common is whatever is a seed of the environmental world. The uncommon is whatever is a seed of one's individual spheres. So this is a little bit similar to what we talked about, collective karma. The karma that we create in union with others. So everyone sees this more or less the same thing. And then the uncommon is your individual response to that. Here it says, the uncommon is whatever is a seed of one's own individual spheres. That which is common is a seed of what arises devoid of feeling. So that means the environmental world. Do plants have feelings? Snehi, you believe plants have feelings? Why is that? Or are you just joking?
I don't know, because from the Indian tradition, they have consciousness, like, and so I grew up in that tradition, and I just feel like plants are also sentient beings. I know it's not considered to be that in the Buddhist tradition, but I still feel that.
Yeah, right. So we've talked about this many times over the last couple of years. Generally, Buddhism believes that there are, the famous experiments of people put some probes on the leaves of plants, and someone comes in the room and with a knife and slashes plants, and the plants that are not slashed, they're sort of in the same room. They have signals coming up, and people, oh, that means they have consciousness. They know the others have been harmed. And then later they do another experiment when the person just walks into the room, and immediately the plants start to have some responses, though they recognize that person. Buddhism, from the point of view of Buddhism, what generally takes place is there are beings that reside within trees, within plants, and I don't mean just nagas, but other kinds of spirits that reside there, and they are sentient beings, right? So there could be some kind of response like that. But anyway, that's another story. So let me just read you how this verse So this verse that we just read, this where it says "and," this comes later in chapter 1, verse 60. The verse that we just read before, why is it called appropriating consciousness? That is verse 5. So quite a bit further in chapter 1, from Lamont's translation, translated into English. It's, if you happen to have that text, it's on page 110, whereas the other one was on page 35. So it's quite a bit further. I think it took me some time to find these quotations in there. So there it says, when it is shared, the store consciousness, the alaya vijnana, is the seed of the world receptacle. So that's the common, shared or common. When it is unshared, when it is uncommon, it is the seed of the individual bases of consciousness. Shared, it is the seed of the insentate world. Now, did I put an extra T in there? Insennate world. What does that mean, Diana? Insennate.
I think perhaps you meant insensate.
Oh, yes, I did. I did mean I did mean that. I misspoke. I said insensate. Is that's the correct pronunciation, right?
Yes.
Insensate. So what does that mean?
In this case, I believe, actually, I'm not sure whether it's that which is not capable of being, of that which is not capable of sensing something else. I
Right.
think that's probably what they mean. Yeah.
Right. So that's just another translation of what Jimpa had translated as, what did he said? Insentient things. And what Venerable Joan had translated as a seed of that which arises devoid of feeling. Okay.
Which is closer to the Tibetan, Sorwa Mepa.
Say again?
Venerable Jones' translation, devoid of feeling, is closer to the Tibetan. Which
Yeah,
is,
Sorameba. Right,
yeah.
right. So let me read it again. When it is shared, the store consciousness, the alaya vijnana, is the seed of the world receptacle world, the environment. When it is unshared, that part of it that is exclusive to the individual, it is the seed of the individual bases of consciousness. Shared, it is the seed of the insensate world. Unshared, it is the seed of the sensate world, the feeling world, or yeah. Shared, it is the seed of the insensate world. Unshared, it is the seed of the sensate world. Okay. Okay, so that's the quotation from Mahayana Samgraha. So why did he, now the commentary to that, because Chandrakirti had quoted that. Is that right? Could Chandrakirti had been quoting a Sangha? Shanka thinks he could. Yeah, Doris, what do you think?
I'm kind of confused on who's having a conversation with this question response format.
Right. So what we just read, these question response, this is just Chittamatra. This is a Sangha talking, expounding on Chittamatra view. Okay. So I was asked, oh, Paul, you have a nice companion.
Yes, exactly.
Nice
Yes,
kitty cat.
indeed.
Yeah. So What was I going to say? Okay, let me just read the commentary here. So Lama Tsongkhapa comments on this. I guess what I was asking was, could Lama Tsongkhapa, could Chandrakirti have been actually quoting a Sangha? Did a Sangha come before or after Chandrakirti?
Way before.
Way before, right?
Yeah.
So that's that was Chandrakirti quoting Asanga's Mahayana Samgraha. So Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to those quotations says, thus the seeds for the container world, that means the environment, right? That everyone shares in common, as opposed to the sentient beings that are its its contents. When you have the receptacle, you can put contents in it. Thus, the seeds for the container world residing in the foundation consciousness. So those are the common seeds in the alaya vijnana, are described as seeds of all entities that are insentient or insensate or without feeling, so that counters the Hindu or other, modern people that would say that plants and so forth, the environment has feelings. Usually, do people feel, does anyone feel that rocks have feelings? Water? Generally, no. Maybe there's some. Sean, I'll get to you in a second. With your permission. And the same statement is found in the summary here. That means the summary of the explanations of the levels of yogic practice as well. How does Venerable Joan translate that? She probably translates. That's in Asanga's Compendium of Ascertainments. Jimpa's note 557. What does that say? Asanga Yogacara Bhumi Vinishchaya Samgraha. This text is one of the 5 summaries, samgrahas, on the levels of yogic practice composed by Asanga. So the Yogacara Bhumi was a text composed by Asanga, commentary, and he wrote commentaries or summaries of various parts of that. And this is one of them, one of those summaries. Okay, let me go back there, 557. So, and the same statement is found in the summary of the explanations of the levels of yogic practice as well. In commentary on maybe you should have said in the commentary on Dependent Origination Sutra, maybe you don't need the, I don't know. Also, it says that name and form come into being through being conditioned by foundation consciousness. So this is another commentary that is going to be falling in expounding something about alaya vijnana, right? A commentary on Dependent Origination Sutra. Also says that name and form come into being through being conditioned by foundation consciousness, where it identifies name as the remaining 4 aggregates other than form, and form as material forms composed of elements and their derivatives. What does that mean, and their derivatives? Do you know, Paul?
Well, I assume that it means gross level objects, as opposed to just sort of the.
So generally, when we talk about in Abhidharma, when we talk about the elements, how many elements are there?
They're the 4 basic.
Basic 4 elements, right? And then say those are called jungwa.
Bhuta in Sanskrit.
Yeah, Jungwashi, Bhuta. So what arises from them are other kinds of things that are derivative from that, such as tactile sensations and so forth. So they're all all of the main elements and all of the other things that are derived from those elements. Let's see. Further, it speaks of how such a form does not exist in the formless realm, but does exist in the other two realms. Other two realms means the form realm and the desire realm. So the desire realm, the form and formless realms. Form does not exist in the formless realm. Generally, that's what's said in the sutra. Generally, it's also in detailed explanation explained there's still some subtle form there. Thus, there appear to be many instances where the Chittamatra school does seem to accept material form. So that was one of the other things that we're talking about. They do accept that there is an external world, but they don't accept that there's an external world separate from the mind. And they do accept that there is material form, or at least it does appear that way. Okay, Sean, for letting you.
I guess I'm still a little confused because I thought that they were claiming that each person had their own foundational consciousness.
They do.
But then they're talking about this common foundation consciousness that how does that overlap between?
Not common foundation consciousness, common seeds. So that which is common, those those seeds on the consciousnesses of other, say, animals that see the same, they see trees in the same way we do, more or less, right? But they have their own particular karmic appearance of those things. Remember, I gave the example of the preta and so forth has its own appearance of the sun and the moon and so forth and so on.
Okay.
So it's not talking about that they share, there's a common alaya vijnana. It's not talking about that. They have their own continuum of alaya vijnana, but the seeds upon them, let's say there's a collective, the seeds of collective karma that we have created in previous lifetimes with sentient beings, that we see the whole vessel world in more or less the same way. And the uncommon seeds on our consciousness, and from Chittamatra point of view, on the alaya vijnana, are our individual responses to those, like whether we like broccoli or not, right? Okay. Let's get, something for you to think about. So continuing with Jimpa's translation, if this is not the case, if this were not the case, then when it comes to all the contexts where one speaks in terms of form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and so on, which are defined on the basis of the form aggregate, right? We talk about forms and sounds. I see that tree. I see the form of that tree. I see the color of that tree. I hear the sound. I smell the odor and so forth and so on. Those are contexts where one speaks in terms of form, sound, and so on, which are defined on the basis of the form aggregate. So the form aggregate includes all of those things, right? Remember the two different meanings of form. We could talk about the form aggregate, which includes all of these things. It includes sounds are part of the form aggregate. Odors are part of the form aggregate. But when we talk about visual form, it's the same word, rupa in Sanskrit or zuk in Tibetan, but it's talking about just the visual forms. Okay, so it would be viable for the Chittamatra to engage in everyday transactions using such conventions. It would not be viable for the Chittamatra to engage in everyday transactions using such conventions unless some entirely new system of convention were created. As far as I, Lama Tsongkhapa, this is Lama Tsongkhapa writing, as far as I can tell, there is no one among the Buddhists of the noble land of India who, despite seeing that conventions such as form, sound, and so on cannot be maintained within their system, still maintains that theirs is an excellent standpoint. Okay, so what are we talking about here? The noble land of India. So usually when the Tibetans referred to India, they call it the land of the Aryas, or as Jimpa's translating here, the noble land, right? I didn't put the Tibetan there. So as far as Lama Tsongkhapa can tell, there is no one among the Buddhists of India who, despite seeing that conventions such as form, sound, and so on cannot be maintained within their system, still maintains that theirs is an excellent standpoint. What does that mean? So Venerable Jones says, if that were not the case, then when it comes to all contexts where one speaks in terms of form, sound, and so on, which are defined on the basis of the form aggregate, it would not be viable for the Chittamatra to engage in everyday transactions using such conventions unless some entirely new system of convention were created. Seeing such conventions as unsuitable, some new system of convention, right? Seeing such conventions as unsuitable, yet still saying this tenet system is excellent, does not occur with respect to any of the Buddhists of the noble land of India. Okay, a little bit oblique. Then what does it say? As for the meaning of the phrase, quote, those who propound objects of knowledge to be internal, who propounds objects of knowledge to be internal? What does that mean? Nadine, what does that mean to you?
I think it means the Chittamatra, because internal means in the mind. All the objects of knowledge are in the mind.
Right. So this is another way of referring to the Chittamatra. As for the meaning of the phrase, those who propound objects of knowledge to be internal, quote, objects of knowledge refer to form, sound, and so on, and these are not asserted to be external, but are propounded to be inner realities. Mikhail.
Yeah, I have a proposal for the previous sentence, if you may.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
There is some similar statement in the Lamrim Chenmo. I think it is saying that no proponent of a system would, on one side, say that usual, ordinary things like forms and so on are impossible, and at the same time assert that system and say that our system is good.
Right, yeah. Did you say frogs?
No, forms and so on.
I'm hearing frogs.
Sorry.
Forms. Forms.
Forms.
Oh,
Yes.
forms.
Frogs also.
I know the British sometimes demean the French as being frog eaters or something like that. I mean, I thought that's what you were saying. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, are we okay? So now we come up with another kind of question and answer here. Question. Now, if the Chittamatra school accepts form, sound, and so on, they accept them, then their rejection of external reality will amount to a merely semantic point, for it is those very things like form and the rest that are perceived as external that others posit to constitute external reality. Okay, giving a good point here. What does semantic mean, Louise? Merely a semantic point. What would that mean?
Words, just words.
Just
Yes,
words.
you know, playing with words.
What?
Playing with words.
Playing with words. Okay. So let's see here. What did Venerable Joan translates? Objection rather than question. If the Chittamatrans accept forms, sounds, and so forth, their rejection of external objects become a merely semantic point, because those very forms and so forth that appear to be external are posited as external. Okay. There we go. So let's see what the response is, what the answer is. Lama Tsongkhapa says, this would be like saying to the Madhyamaka that its argument rejecting intrinsic existence of form and so on, yet maintaining their existence, is raising a merely semantic point, right? So Madhyamaka says that, well, he's saying Madhyamaka in its argument rejecting intrinsic existence. Not all Madhyamaka rejects intrinsic existence, right? The Svatantrika Madhyamaka accepts. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure I didn't put the Tibetan here in my notes, so I can't check it. Venerable Joan translated that. This would be like saying to the Madhyamikas that their argument rejecting forms and so forth to be established by way of their own character. Okay, that's different than intrinsic existence. While still positing forms and so forth, is raising a merely semantic point, in brackets, because they still acknowledge the existence of forms and so forth, whose establishment by way of their own character they deny. Okay, so who can explain this? Don, can you explain that? It's unfair. That's a tough one. I should ask you.
I don't think so, Venerable.
Richard, what do you think that's saying? Or if you have another question.
I think, well, he's proposing a simile, right?
Right.
He's proposing that there is saying that the Chittamatrans are making a point about forms, and it's basically a semantic distinction, is similar to saying that when Madhyamikas posit the existence of non-inherently existing forms, that it's similar. That it's basically that if we say that that's a semantic difference, we're saying if we say that the Chittamatrans are making a semantic distinction, then we have to say the same thing about the Madhyamakas. And I'm not buying the simile myself, personally. I think there's a huge difference between saying that the Chittamatrans have a serious problem with the notion of form and external forms and inner forms, and the Madhyamakas don't.
You're
Really,
obviously, you're obviously a
the
diving.
Chittamatran discussion, the Chittamatran explanation here is just simply incoherent to me. It makes absolutely no sense.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, maybe it depends on how you go into it there. So the question was, if the Chittamatra school accepts form, sound, and so on. So remember we said they do accept that there are forms. Chittamatra does accept, but that there are not forms that are separate from the mind, right? So if the Chittamatra school accepts forms, sound, and so on, then their rejection of external reality will amount to merely a semantic point. That's what the argument is here, questioning the Chittamatra. And Lama Tsongkhapa's or Chandrakirti's response, mediated by Lama Tsongkhapa, says that's not the case. It's not just a semantic point. They do have a distinction there, the same way that the Madhyamaka has a point in saying that phenomena are not inherently existent, yet they conventionally exist. Some people would like to say that's just a semantic point. Or as Jimpa translates, this would be like saying the Madhyamaka, that would be like saying to the Madhyamaka that its argument rejecting the intrinsic existence of form and so on, yet maintaining their existence conventionally, is raising merely a semantic point. But that's a very important, not a semantic point at all. It's a very important point from the Madhyamaka point of view, because they still acknowledge the existence of form and so on, whose very intrinsic existence they deny. That's important to note there. Because they acknowledge the existence of form and so on, because whose very intrinsic existence they deny. So they deny the intrinsic existence, inherent existence, existence from its own characteristic of forms and so forth, yet they say that they still exist. Other schools would find that contradictory and just talking words.
I'm sorry, but I accept that there's an important distinction in the Prasangika thing, but what I don't accept is that this simile makes any sense, because I don't think I think that it's not a semantic distinction in the Prasangika, but I think it is basically a semantic distinction in the Chittamatra, because I think that they are accepting the reality of external forms, but they are claiming somehow or another that it's all in the mind. Because otherwise, if external forms are in the mind, okay, if a form is in the mind, then there's a part of the mind that is not form, and there's a part of the mind that is form. And ultimately, then one of them has to be in the other, has to be separate from the other. So you're talking about externalities. I just honestly don't get it at all.
Okay. I understand there's some confusion there, or seems to be some contradiction. Let's read the next sentence. Okay. In any case, the next sentence says, in any case, this touches upon a point that seems to be most difficult for both schools. Okay, so the difficulty in the Prasangika is how to posit conventionalities once you've already set out that phenomena are not inherently existent, right? For most of the lower schools, if things are not inherently existent, they can't exist at all. So how could you have conventionalities? That's a difficult point. But for the Chittamatra, let's see. In any case, this touches upon a point that seems to be most difficult for both schools. Not only is it a challenge for the Madhyamaka standpoint to posit form and so on in the aftermath of negating their intrinsic existence, not only that, there is a similar challenge for the Chittamatra also, for if external reality is negated, meaning, of course, there's always the proviso in Chittamatra, external reality that is a different entity than the mind. They're not rejecting external, that there is an external world, but that there is an external, when they say there is an external world, that means it appears to be an external world, but it is not, because it is the entity of the mind. For if external reality is negated, form and so on become non-existent. And if form and so on are posited, then external reality may need to be admitted as well. These are certainly thorny questions, Richard. You're right to question it. But fearing, I'm going to write too much, fearing length, I have not written more about these matters here.
That may be a blessing.
Right. We applaud you, Lama Tsongkhapa. Or as Venerable Jones says, translated, in any case, this touches upon a point that appears to be most difficult for both tenet systems. Not only is it difficult for the Madhyamaka standpoint to posit a form and so forth in the aftermath of negating their inherent existence, there is a similar difficulty also for the Chittamatra system, for when external objects are refuted, forms and so forth are also become non-existent. And when forms and so forth are posited, there is seen to be the need to also posit external objects. Although this is indeed difficult, I have not written about it through fearing too many words. Or the word words is not in the sense. So what would you say? Fearing multiplicity or something like that. Okay. How are we doing? So thorny questions, Richard is correct to bring up, but from the defenders of Chittamatra, they have no difficulty. They say that's not just semantics for them. They say that there are forms, there is external world, but none of those exist as separate entities from the mind. And that's not just for them, that's not a semantic difference, in the same way that for Madhyamaka, that there is no contradiction in saying that phenomena are not inherently existent, yet they conventionally exist. Snehi.
But Richard, I was just curious, where it says here, I have not written more about these matters here. Is there another text if we want to go into Chittamatra more, where he explains this?
So I know about this particular point, I'm not sure. I'll see if I can find. But generally, this other text that I mentioned that was translated by Gareth Sparham, translation of the Kunchi Kadel. Kunchi means alaya vijnana, Ka means difficult, Del means commentary. So commentary on the difficult points of alaya vijnana, that may have something within it on the Chittamatra point of view here, but I'm not sure. I'll do some more checking for you, okay?
Thank you, Venerable George.
Yeah, okay. So then, to continue, in Jimba's translation, it says, so this is all part of this one section about setting out the opponent's view. This is all talking about the Chittamatra point of view. So verse 647 says, therefore, dependent nature, which is the cause of imputed things, has intrinsic existence. It emerges in the absence of external objects. It actually exists and is beyond the realm of concepts. Oh, okay. So the Tibetan says, let's see what he says. How did he translate? Therefore, dependent nature, which is the cause of imputed things, has intrinsic existence. The Tibetan says, Deche Shengi Wangi. So Shenwang, or I have to keep going back here, dependent nature. So what does Shenwang mean literally, Paul?
Other powered.
Other powered. So that's not a translation that many people appreciate. I think Jeffrey translated sometimes as other powered phenomena. So what it means is things that are not that depend on causes and conditions, right? So Deche Shengi Wangi Ngogang Ngopo Takbar Yopa Gyurgyur Shing. How does he get from that has intrinsic existence?
It's the fourth line, Rongshinyu.
Oh, that's in the fourth line, right? Right. Yodang Trokun Yomin Rangshinyu. So in the Tibetan, oftentimes at the very end of the sentence is some qualifying phrase that applies to things before it. So putting it into English, you'll put that at the beginning of the sentence, because you will usually do it in the opposite way, right? Therefore, dependent nature. So what is dependent nature? Does anyone know? Don't say the Buddha knows. What are dependent natures? KT, do you remember from our earlier studies of tenets?
My mind is thinking about dependent nature and imaginary nature and ultimate nature of Chittamatra, so I'm not sure if I'm going in the right direction.
Right, right. So when we talk about the three natures in the Chittamatra and also in other systems also, we talk about these three, but Chittamatra has its own take on this. Dependent nature or other powered phenomena refers to the things that are dependently arising, that depend on causes and conditions. What are the other two?
Is it one that
Imaginary or imputed, what do you say, Paul?
Imputational natures.
Imputational, or sometimes translated imaginary.
consummate?
And then thoroughly established natures.
Thoroughly established nature. So for the Chittamatra, what is a thoroughly established nature?
That is the absence of a duality of subject and object.
Yeah,
it's emptiness.
That's what they call emptiness. Their non-duality. And the imputed nature or the imaginary nature?
Yeah, those are objects that are imputed as being established by way of their own character and as the reference of names and concepts.
That just came off the tip of your tongue. You're reading.
No, that's just beaten into me by Jeffrey.
Oh, okay.
Memorized.
Good. Okay, so here, Venerable Jones' translation of this says, because of that, Deiche, whatever is the entity of the other powered, that's what Jimpa translates as dependent phenomena, becomes the cause of imputedly existent things. That's just the first two lines of that at that point. So Jimpa's translation continues, and he has in quotations here Chittamatra. So this is the Chittamatra commenting. That verse is essentially the Chittamatra statement, right, of their standpoint. Given that the settled meaning of the scriptures is known to be as we have explained above, Chittamatra says, one should accept without hesitation. One should accept without hesitation, therefore, that dependent nature has intrinsic existence. One should accept without hesitation, therefore, that dependent nature has intrinsic existence. Okay, so dependent nature, from the Chittamatra point of view, or other powered phenomena, refers to all of the things that we usually call conventionalities, right? They are, from the Chittamatra point of view, intrinsically existent, inherently existent, intrinsically existent. Is that right? So for Chittamatra, because it's only when you get to the Madhyamaka that phenomena are considered not to be, only when you get to the Prasangika that you come to the point where phenomena are not inherently existent. Okay, let's read a little bit further. Given that the settled meaning of the scriptures is known to be as we have explained above, one should accept without hesitation, therefore, that dependent nature has intrinsic existence. This is because we maintain it to be the cause of the entire network of conceptualization, such as the apprehension of things of the subject and object world as imputed, as existing as substantially distinct from one another. Yeah. Which was a 647. Let me see how Venerable Joan, I don't have Venerable Joan's translation there. Go on. Someone who's going to say something? Okay. So in Venerable Joan's translation of the first two lines of that, 647A and B, therefore dependent nature, which is the cause of imputed things, has intrinsic existence. She begins there, the Chittamatran state, therefore the presentation of the scriptures is renowned as being that explained before. And then she gives those two lines. Because of that, whatever is the entity of the other powered becomes the cause of imputedly existent things. I see, because she's taking the first two lines, which the second line is actually, it emerges in the absence of external objects, right? Okay. Because of that, or therefore, whatever is the entity of the other powered becomes the cause of imputedly existent things. And then the commentary to that, I'm not quite sure if she's tracked this correctly. Because of that, whatever is the entity of inherently existent other powered phenomena is to be unquestionably asserted. Whatever is the entity of inherently existent other powered is to be unquestionably asserted. This is because they are asserted to be the cause In other words, the basis of all the net of conceptions without exception, such as apprehending things that are apprehended, that's the objects, and the apprehenders, the subjects, as imputed, as existing as different substances. She has a note there, 73, amended according to Jimpa. Okay, let's go back to Jimpa again. So he has all four lines there together. So he says, therefore, dependent nature, which is the cause of imputed things, has intrinsic existence. And therefore, dependent nature emerges in the absence of external objects. Is that right? And dependent nature actually exists. And dependent nature is beyond the realm of concepts. And his note 559 says, this numbering of these three attributes of dependent nature, while not present in the root text itself, has been adopted from Chandrakirti's commentary. Okay, so he's Jimpa is explaining how he's translated that stanza, that shloka, based on the commentary. Okay, let's read the commentary once again. We're just about ready to finish up here. Chittamatra says, given that the settled meaning of the scriptures is known to be as we have explained above, one should accept without hesitation, therefore, that dependent nature has intrinsic existence. This is because we maintain it to be the cause of the entire network of conceptualization, such as the apprehension of things of the subject-object world as imputed, as existing as substantially distinct from one another. So I'm very happy to see some of you are pondering that. See, Richard is in the his pondering mood, the thinker. Stephen, can you grok that sentence?
You know, I'm wondering, Venerable George, what I'm thinking about is for Chittamatra, when they say imputed, do they mean appearing as substantially distinct from each other, different from, say, the Prasangika usage? Is that what that's implying?
So he's using the word imputed things, imputed as in that stanza, where it says ngopo takpa yope gyurgyur shing, right? Which is the cause of existing ngopo takpar, the cause of things existing as imputations. So for them, what is the meaning of imputation here? What is being imputed from the Chittamatra point of view?
Isn't it saying that they're imputing the subject-object aspect of it?
That would be something that would be, so when we talk about these three natures, we're talking about the dependent nature, the imputational nature. Is that how Jeffrey translated?
Yes.
So what is the imputational nature again, Paul?
It is objects, they are imputed as, I have to get it right again. Imputational natures are objects that are established by way of their own character as the referent of names and concepts, is one way of putting it. Alternately, it's that, as Stephen was saying, objects existing as separate from the consciousness apprehending them. And it's said that those two are the same thing.
So, right. And so that we'll get into that later about whether those are the same thing or not. In Jeffrey's commentary on Drungne Lekshe Ningbo, I think there's a much discussion about that. Okay, let's leave it right here, right now. This another thorny point, and we'll continue this a little bit on discussion on Monday, but we'll try to have a clearer understanding of this next time. Let me just see if I can make a note here. This is where we're ending, where it says, given that the settled meaning of the scriptures, that sentence is where we're going to try to start next time. Okay, how are we doing? Are your minds exploding? What do you think, Mikhail? You okay?
Yeah, it's thorny, as you say.
Yeah.
Needs to be read times.
Anna, are you following as usual?
Thank you, Venerable George. I'm following, but I'm also finding it thorny, and I have to read it a few times.
Yeah, we got, yeah, it was good. Was it you, Richard, who used thorny a little while ago? Or was the text say thorny? Oh yeah, the text said these are certainly thorny questions. So yeah. And I don't have the Tibetan there. What was it? What Mikhail, what did he translate as thorny here? What is the Tibetan? I don't have it right in front of me.
I haven't checked.
Anyway.
I think it's just difficult. It's ga, didak ga me kyang. Although these are difficult.
These are indeed difficult. Okay. So yeah. So before we end, anyone have any questions or points you'd like to bring up? Don, you look like you have something. No? Okay.
I have challenges and confusion right now.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Snehi, you okay?
Yeah, thoroughly confused, Venerable George. Every time I think I get it, then there's another contradictory statement that I can't wrap my head around.
All right. So we're getting into we haven't gotten to the section where there's an exposition on these three natures. That will be coming a little bit later. And again, you might wonder if Chandrakirti was meaning to explain the Madhyamaka view, especially the Prasangika, as opposed to the Svatantrika, why is he spending so much time on the Chittamatra? Because these were the two main schools, Mahayana schools, in contradiction, or let's say in contradistinction to the Prasangika. So the Svatantrika was the one that Bhavaviveka presented, and Bhavaviveka criticized Buddhapalita's interpretation, which Chandrakirti followed, the Prasangika. And also there has to be some reckoning of the other prominent Mahayana school of the time. So when Chandrakirti was there, certainly still to this day, there are people who practice and believe in the Chittamatra in Japan and so forth, other countries. So that this is why this is being refuted, because those were the two major opponents of the Prasangika view at that time. Yeah, Mikhail.
I think it was also one of the main ways in which Chandrakirti supplements Nagarjuna's work, refuting the Chittamatra point of view.
Right.
So
when we talk about the title Madhyamaka Vatara, as Jeffrey likes to translate it, as supplement to the middle way, as opposed to entering the middle way. And there were various rationales for translating it that way. And one of the things was that, as Mikhail has said, that Chandrakirti has supplemented the presentation from fundamental wisdom with other material from the Ratnavali, from the Precious Garland, and from other texts. but as Mikhail said, also supplementing some topics that that Nagarjuna didn't address directly, although indirectly. Did the Chittamatra, I asked before, did the Chittamatra exist at the time of Nagarjuna, Mikhail?
Asanga, the pioneer, is later than Nagarjuna.
Right.
So
Snehi was agreeing with you by saying no, but didn't the sutras exist at the time of?
Sure.
Yeah, and so in fact, in some of the quotations we had from the Jagtrub Semdel from the commentary on Bodhicitta by Nagarjuna, he does refer to Alaya Vijnana. So it was sort of the Chittamatra and from the Lankavatara Sutra, where it says all the three realms are Chittamatra, our mere mind, our only mind. That was well known, but the school had not yet, as Snehi was agreeing with you, had not yet existed formally at that time, but the concepts were still there and to be countered. So there is allusion in Nagarjuna's writings to Chittamatra, but needs to be supplemented by Chandrakirti, as Mikhail has said in his Majjhimaka Avtara. Okay. So yeah, this is it the 28th? What is today? Is that a week from today? Today is
Today's the 19th, Venerable George.
19th, yeah. So that we still have time before the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. Is that right? On the 28th? Wheel turning day. So if you have a chance, that's still we'll still have a class before that, apparently. So we'll remind you then that's a great time to create virtuous karma and so forth. So let's end up with we try to set some motivation at the beginning. If you'd like to make that larger, that would be great, Shanka. There we go. We're going to start with the dedications, right? There we go. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha. When it says Lama Sangye Drupgyurne, it says, having become, you could say, having become a Guru Buddha, may I lead all graders without exception into that enlightened state. So the nay, when it says Lama Sangye Drupgyurne, that kind of indicates that has to be achieved first in order to lead sentient beings into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen, my mind stream and the mind stream of others, arise and grow as a result of these virtues. And may that bodhicitta that has arisen within my mind and the mind of others not diminish, but increase more and more due to these merits, due to these virtues. Appeared as teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow upon us here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, so that's how Lama Zopa and great beings have upheld the teachings through explanation and practice. So the lung and the explanation, even if you don't have the realizations, and through the practice, means keeping the vows and so forth. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged, Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother migrating beings, you suddenly departed to peace, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and of the great waves of bodhicitta of the Bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. Then finally, for all of our present gurus, our primordial gurus who've cultivated us through so many lives, you who were my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you. Doris, was there something I asked you to remind me? I can't remember if I asked you to remind me of something.
Yes, you did, but you did cover it. It was about the 28th.
Okay, right. So if you can, any virtuous actions that you create on that day are multiplied. It's still a couple of weeks, so we'll have another reminder of that. I look forward to seeing you on Monday. If you have a chance, try to read this section right after verse 647 again. And we'll see if we can make more sense of it then.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.